Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cannabusiness Live. I'm Craig Aronoff, along with Barton Morris from the Cannabis Legal Group, and we're here, as we are every week, to discuss the ins and outs of Michigan's new Medical Marijuana Facility Licensing Act and what's going on with the new marketplace here in Michigan. We strongly encourage and hope that you'll enjoy today's show. Please like us, share us. If you have any questions throughout around the show, please feel free to reach out. You could find us at cannabis-legal-group.com as well as our Facebook page at Cannabis Legal Group. And we're very excited to bring to you new information as we do every week. On our site, please also be reminded we do keep a municipality list, so cannabis-legal-group.com/municipality. If you're interested in local communities and whether or not they're participating under the new act or what they're doing, it gives you an opportunity to see that, and we strongly encourage any collaboration. If you know of a place that's not listed, please reach out. A lot of the information has really been provided by a lot of third parties, and we really appreciate all the help that we've received. Also, we're doing our best to connect our client operators with potential employees. So we have a new jobs page that's on there as well, so /jobs on our webpage, and you have an opportunity to upload your resume, and we'll be talking to a lot of those candidates about training and some other programs here in the near future. Today we're going to be talking about business planning, but before we do, we had an update again yesterday from the advisory bulletin. Bart, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the Bureau did yesterday?
The Bureau administered an advisory bulletin specifically identifying the points at which they'll be testing, chemical testing, during the process of the cultivation and processing and sale of the cannabis within the commercial operation. This is an interesting bulletin, as I did sit on the working group for the safety compliance facilities, and this is not an issue that was discussed, although I think looking at the bulletin it makes perfect sense because what it states is that the state is going to require chemical testing of the cannabis for safety at two specific points. I think they could probably add to it later, but at least for right now, they're saying those specific points shall be after harvest at a commercial cultivation or growing facility, and then after processing at a processor facility. These things make sense. For instance, after harvest, that is when the growing process is over, and they want to ensure, and it's possible for at that point it to be transferred right to a dispensary for sale. And so clearly it's got to be tested first, and this is an opportunity to be looking for a lot of these problems like pesticides, or banned pesticides, I should say. And then, of course, microbiological contaminations like mold, mildew, and pests, and metals, and a lot of other things that they're going to be testing for. It also makes sense to test after processing as well, because then that's the only time they'll be able to test for residual solvents. When processing, oftentimes solvents are used. I think actually all the time solvents are used, and those solvents have to be removed before it moves on to final sale. And so those are logical times at which that the testing is going to occur, and that's what they've announced.
Yeah, and in essence, it's really right in between these transfer points. When you're a grower, before you can actually sell it to a processor or provisioning center, it makes sense that you're selling them a certified, tested product. Similarly, if you're a processor, you're doing the same. So in part, what it really says, as well as the provisioning center, every single product on its shelf cannot be on its shelf unless there's a certification that's been tested. So the only way the provisioning center can buy it is with the certification already in the system. And the bulletin went on to add one other thing, which is just, I think we all kind of anticipated to be the case, which is that those testing results are going to be on metric, on the seed to sale tracking system, available to the licensees involved in that particular product. So a grower will have all of their stuff on the system, as well as the provisioning center. What they purchase, it'll transfer over to them. So that's really the only update from the marijuana board this week in terms of any bulletins. I think with the rate at which they've been sending those out, it's probably reasonable to expect there's going to be a constant flow of these operational advices and whatnot. So again, this is just more and more information coming out. And for all those communities that have been saying we're waiting on the state to do things, it's really great that the state's finally doing things, and we're hopefully going to gain a little more traction in their approvals to move forward and opt in. And that brings us to business planning. And, you know, why does it bring us to business planning? Well, because every community is going to require a look at what the plans are for their operators. If they approve this and want licensees in their town, everyone's going to have to demonstrate that they have a plan for what they're doing, that they've thought it through, and that there's a vision that they intend to move on rather than just randomly moving forward. And so we know it's going to be a requirement of the state license process. It's reasonable to assume that every municipality is also going to want to look for that. And then, of course, anyone looking to get, raise any money and find an investor, there's a certainty that they all want it. And so before anyone can really move forward in this is a necessity of what we're going to see in our marketplace to move forward. So that's the why, and the who is everybody. If you're going to get a license, you're going to have to do this. And so what we want to do is just kind of break down, like, what is a business plan? Like, why don't we talk about it at a high level, and then we'll work into the details a little bit.
I want to reiterate that everybody needs to be doing this. It is a requirement, just as Craig said, not only for the state, but also municipalities as well. And also for investing, but also to make sure that you have a plan. I think that most businesses fail because they're not properly planned in multiple different facets. But specifically, business planning is critically important. So even if it wasn't necessary for licensing, which it is, it's still a very important thing. So the fact that so this has become now a huge deal for us, because now we're reviewing lots of people's business plans. We're creating our own specialized business plans on behalf of our clients. And so anybody that's interested in getting a facilities license has to start now. They take some time, because a good business plan requires good research and good support and a good realistic understanding of the market and the business in which that somebody seeks to participate in. And so what was your question? Let's talk about
So I mean, in essence, what we're really doing is the business plan is the vision of the operators, the people. What are they looking to do, and what's their blueprint to get to success? And so it's not just I have an idea. As we break it down, you've already mentioned the research and the requirements that will be involved. I think in prior Facebook Lives we talked about when you estimate things for like lights and stuff like that, you really got to do the diligence to find out what kind of lights, how much do they cost. And so as we go through the checklist of things that we're going to see in most business plans, and there's obviously going to be things that'll be nuanced for each type of operator. They all should be specialized to the company that you are and who we're working for. What's the color scheme? What's the logos? What are the things that have already been done to allow this to stand on its own 2 feet for itself, rather than be compared to other generic business plans? And so one of the top items in this is the executive summary. And so this is the starting point that people will make their first impression, because it's supposed to be a short summary of what the rest of this document is going to say. So tell me a little bit about what your executive summaries have looked like as you put those together.
Yeah, I've written many executive summaries, and at first it's important to remember that it is a summary. It is not something that is intended to be multiple pages. It's supposed to be a short, concise, yet detailed examination of what this business plan purports to endeavor to do or accomplish. The executive summary, I like to begin with simply a brief understanding of the environment. So this is the in Michigan, the Medical Marijuana Act, beginning in 2008, it's created a number of patients that is second largest to all states within the country. And then these people need a commercial and safe manner in which to receive their medicine. And this is what the MMFLA has done. It doesn't take much more than that to get started. And then how does this particular business or company plan to participate within that market, and in what fashion? And they may be doing so in a multitude of different ways, but have a summary about that. It may be just in being a dispensary or provisioning center, or maybe a more vertically integrated enterprise, because But those are the things that have to be in there, right? And so, but a brief summary so that somebody reading it can move on and say, okay, now I understand what the plan is, or at least a summary of the plan, And so, and you don't have to call it an executive summary. I've seen other people call it other things as well. But you have to remember, but you just have to remember that anybody reading this is going to be reading it in a manner that is expecting something else. And so just remember, it is a summary, and it doesn't have to be multiple pages. I suggest keeping it brief and moving on, because nobody wants to be reading a business plan for an hour.
Yeah, no, and I think that the executive summary is often the hook, and this is the thing that gets people to read the rest of it. And so, you want to have enough enticement in there that gives enough of a detail to make somebody want to say, this is interesting. I want to go on and learn more about this project. So just a few of the bullet points that are going to be kind of found elsewhere in it, but just the highlights. And so again, this is something that when they open it up, it's their first impression. Aside from the cover page that should have your logo and some other things on it, what's the next page? And that's what we're going to be talking and seeing from that. Of course, it should have a table of contents. So once you put it all together, you can put it back up so you can say, hey, refer to my operational plan, and then they'd be able to go to a specific page from the table of content. But the next thing that I think is critical, and this is something that is very important to every person reading it, is the actual profile in the team members and the biography. And so you can call it a couple of different titles on the table of content, but every plan should include who you are and who the team members are and what their talents are that they bring to the table. So my advice in talking to a lot of people right now thinking about what to do next and looking at different things is work on your bios. Get this down. Figure out the most concise way to describe you in the best light you can, and include all of those experiences that you individually have. What is your background? What is your education? What kind of work have you done that relates well to this industry that can be transformative? So what you did in another industry can be used to leverage it as an asset in this one. And describing yourselves, and what will happen is you'll round off your team. So you'll see where all the assets of your team are together and how they formulate a great partnership to move forward for success. At the same time, what it might also do is allow you to identify the gaps and where you need some assistance and where you can maybe bridge those gaps. And so again, starting with the core of who are the people that we're working with, that's actually why it's up front in these business plans, is so the people reading it know who you are, not just on words, but are beginning to see that. We'd recommend even including a picture of it in that bio, of yourself, I mean. And so, each person can decide for themselves how that looks, but ultimately that's really the next phase of it as we roll into, what would likely be the next step in this business plan, which are the keys to success.
Photos are definitely a good idea, and I also think it's a good idea to include others that may not be like owners or managers, but perhaps somebody that's on your professional team, for instance, like your lawyer, somebody that's critical in the licensing and business process, because a lot of people want to know that you do have a qualified attorney that is assisting you. That means a lot. So you want to add anything to it that you believe is going to be helpful for the reader to be able to understand your likelihood of success. And then sometimes, in this case, I think oftentimes it requires the participation or the inclusion of key participants like your lawyer or perhaps some other consultant that you're working with, and demonstrate their expertise as well. Oh, so you talked about what? Keys to success? Yeah,
so that's sort of the next phase as we get into the business planning is you're kind of identifying what are the key components of moving your project forward. And and laying them out there in a way that is both easy to read, but allows you then to go back through and identify them more specifically and provide that detail. So again,
I read a lot of these business plans, and it's fascinating to me how people think that because they're going to start this marijuana business, they're going to be successful. And that is why we're identifying that the fact is that just because you're getting a license, or you think you're going to get a license, doesn't mean you're going to be successful. You have to be able to identify what sets your business or service apart from others and what's going to give you a competitive advantage. And that is why we are promoting the importance of placing that within the business plan. What are your keys to success? If your keys to success is, well, it's marijuana, and of course I'm going to be successful because it's marijuana. That's not going to work. There's a lot of competition out here, and you're going to have to demonstrate what your competitive advantage is, and that goes in the business plan as well.
No doubt about it. And so that brings us to the next phase, which is your mission statement. And this is something where people can describe their passion. What brought you to this industry? And, in talking with a number of clients, a number of caregivers, a number of patients, a number of people that are, in other industry and want to join into and come into the cannabis industry, there's often, aside from obviously the financial gain that could be had and the money, of course, but there's usually a mission behind that, a passion for the medicine and the passion for the things that, they're looking to do. And so, like, why, what was the storyline that, led to me, this particular, company wanting a certain type of medicine? Are they looking to cure a disease process of a family member that they've suffered from? Or have they, are they growing a certain type of flower that is, with innovative in terms of what they're looking to do? And so the mission statement is really the part of it that outside the, key component of, the summary that allows us to earn that and learn that passion and why this company is going to be successful for its dream. And what happens next is we get into, what does it cost to get started? And so as we break down each of these segments, really what we're going to be talking about is moving towards, building it out, virtually and then physically. And so the next step is determining, what do you need? How much does it cost to do it? From both the land and from the operational setup of the facility. And so taking the time to do the research and the details of that plan is very important to it. And so...
Yeah, and being realistic about it and making sure that you include all of those costs. And many of them people like to forget about. But if you know your business and you know your expenditures, your costs, you have to put that in there so people have a realistic understanding of what they're reading. Again, if it's not realistic and if it's not detailed, then it's less useful.
Oh, no doubt about it. And so you really want to break it down. And so, we previously talked about estimating and saying, and I use the example of the lights because it's a fixed product that we know. When you do your floor planning and you're looking to have a 1,500 plant grow, for instance, you need to know how much space you need within your facility for the type of lights you're using and for the type of other products that'll be in there. How much do the pots cost, for instance? How much water irrigation do you need, and those kind of things. And so it's not something to be estimated. It's something to research, find the product you want to use or two products you want to use, and compare the pricing so that you can say with specificity, this is how much I need to accomplish my goal. For that goal being just lights, for instance. And then each item of your facility, and you're going to literally build it out for yourselves, is virtually. And so that way, when you get to the point where you're looking for money and you're trying to find investors, or you want to know of your own cash flow, what you need to provide in capital, that you have a finite number to work with, at least in terms of those things that you know and should know with certainty, versus those that might be like, for instance, how much your utility burn will be each month. We can estimate that on usage, but obviously until we know exactly how much, lighting and utility cost there really is, it's just estimating at that. But lights and pots and cabinetry for, dispensaries and the security systems, that you should be researching that as well. What's the Wi-Fi cost? How many cameras do you need in your facility? Each one of these items can be broken down and separately itemized.
Right, and they should be.
Absolutely. And so that brings us to the market analysis.
All right, that's critically important, obviously, and it's something, obviously, that a lot of people have trouble with because there is no established market right now within Michigan. In addition to that, people don't know how many other licenses are going to be in operation. They don't know what other cities were surrounding the municipality in which you want to operate, how many other cities are going to have facilities that may be in competition. This is something that does get and should get a lot of your attention. And I'll tell you just from my perspective, the things that I have found to be helpful. There is a lot of information as it relates to data from other states. from Oregon, obviously Washington, Colorado, but other states as well, Illinois, New York, even Hawaii. I read articles all the time about just in Hawaii. I just read a couple days ago about the only 2 or 3 shops that are open right now, the number of patients that they have, and the amount of sales that they have, the average sale they have per patient, per visit. These are things that can be useful even here, and by looking at these numbers, you start to see patterns, and that can be used within these business plans. But in addition to that, sometimes you're going to have to be creative as well. Like, for instance, in writing a business plan, you know that a municipality is going to probably allow a certain number of facilities within a community, and you have to estimate how many other facilities may be in surrounding areas based upon information that you have at that time. You have to try to, as best you can, to determine what the market is and determine like what your sales are going to be, because that's but the more research you put into it, the better off that your projections are going to be. That's what I've learned. And then there's resources like the fact book, right? Yeah. The Marijuana Business Daily Fact Book. I find that to be very resourceful. It has a lot of information in there that can be relied upon, and that is reliable.
Yeah, the industry itself does a lot of data aggregation. So if you take the time to review the industry, be it through, MJ Business Daily does a great job, and if you haven't signed up for their newsletter, I recommend it. It seems to provide a lot of really great content and information. Cannabis Benchmarks is another that, weekly shows you the average cost of wholesale flower and some other data set items. There's companies like New Frontier that are out there that are also aggregating a lot of data, and so taking the time to review the data and then determining what's applicable to your game plan, because there's a lot of data and only a sliver of it might be applicable to what your space is in this industry. But the key is that what's applicable to your plan. And everybody's plan is different. We're going to have, people that are farmers out in rural areas that own their land already, already have their greenhouses, already have approval. And so those are assets that are coming into the plan that are part of the capital of this company, not financial in terms of dollars, but actual physical assets that are being added to it. So there's value in that. What it also means is their startup costs are less. And so what are you bringing to the table that you already have, and identifying those in this plan? Because if you remember, you want to show a complete business plan. So even the items you already have need to be included as an estimate as to what those costs are in terms of value. But you already own them, and so we don't want to leave those out, because you want it to be a full plan in terms of all the things that we're bringing to the table, including the need for capital. And so as you're doing those projections and looking at it, if you're in a rural area that's going to service fewer patients, does the size of your dispensary need to be the same as in a larger urban area? Maybe not. How much inventory do you need to have on your shelves as an estimate too? Because what we're reminding a lot of our operators is, even after you get your license, you're still going to have to expend money to get started. A provisioning center has to have capital to get started and buy inventory to get going. You don't just start off with stuff on your shelves. You got to actually have the capital to put it out there. Growers are going to need to pay for the time frame that it's in production. You're going to have to keep the lights on and employees paid until you get it to a point where it's tested and sold. So all of this data set will help you use the industry itself to help formulate those estimates. And it's important to do the research and to dig in and understand it so that you ask for the right amount of money when you go out into the investment field. And so again, from the just from the market analysis is when you can start doing pro formas on it and turning that data into what your plan would look like and converting it into others' data into yours. And so talk about a little bit about how to pro forma and then how you can project expenses out of that.
So I utilize a pro forma as the summary document that has all those details from your market analysis, your projected revenue, but also your projected expenses, and then putting that all together in an effort to then demonstrate a lot of different things. One could be your burn rate. The rate at which that your hard monthly expenditures are going to be utilized. This is an important number, I think, to demonstrate what your capital liquidity requirement should be, because the state is going to require that that every licensee or prospective licensee does have a proper capitalization and a proper liquidity, and that really is going to be, I think, a basis upon which to judge the burn rate and how much somebody can spend every month. So for instance, if the dispensary is spending in hard capital costs or expenditures at $50,000 every month, then they should have between 6 months and a year of that number in liquidity, and because what were to happen if something were to happen and there's going to be no sales. And so if you don't have that type of if you don't have that liquidity, then your business is going to shut down. And that's what they're trying to avoid. They're not going to license somebody that doesn't have a likelihood of sustaining whatever may come to the market or whatever may come to that business. Things happen, like product recalls happen in this industry, especially in the beginning. And if somebody can't withstand a product recall and to the degree to which that it's going to end up forcing them to close, that's something that has to be taken into consideration in creating the business plan and demonstrating that the licensee does have a proper capitalization.
Yeah, and I think this is another fear of the state, which would be that you give a license to a grower, and halfway through their growing cycle, they run out of money and start to get desperate on how to pay employees and keep lights on. And at that point in time, that's when the invitation to the black market occurs. Trying to upload and get some stuff out of their production facility. And so, again, just on a real simple concept, you got to be able to demonstrate that you can carry the business to revenue. It's not just get started, it's carry it there and make sure that you're well supplied and liquid for that purpose. Included in those expenses, of course, will not only be your startup costs, but your operational costs. We've already mentioned security planning. What kind of equipment and computer equipment do you have in your facility, not only for the Wi-Fi tracking, but also if you're a provisioning center, for instance, what does your cash register look like, in terms of the front end of your business and dealing with the patients themselves and actually, dealing with cash. Each one of these items has to be well thought out and take the time to understand it. It doesn't just happen because you got a license. Each one of these operators is going to have to go out and figure out, internally, how many chairs do you need in your building? How many seats are you going to have every day? How many desks are you going to need? It doesn't matter what kind of business you're in. It happens to be cannabis, but these are just regular old business things that each type of company has to think about. And sometimes we have to remind our clients that it is business, and the business side is what we're talking about right now, and thinking of all the little details, because it's the little details that'll bundle up and aggregate to suddenly be a big problem for somebody if they didn't think it all the way through. And so, in these costs, another major one that isn't as maybe now after a number of months of doing it, more and more people are more aware, but the marketing. Just because you grew it didn't mean anyone bought it. So you have to factor into the cost of your startup, the cost of getting your brand out there, the cost of getting provisioning centers to buy your product and put it on the shelf, cost of processors to know and brand their products and do the same. And so, these are all type of things that have to be kind of brought into it. Are you going to hire an individual to do that? Are you going to do it all online? How much money will each of those things cost? And take the time now to start estimating those and start reviewing. Like if you bought a package today for some kind of Facebook push, we'll know what those prices are and build it into your plan. And that allows you to then project your cash flow. Because once you know all these items, you can then begin to project the actual cash flow. We have an estimate from doing the market data analysis of what kind of cash flow we should expect from certain kind of sales. Then we know what our expenditures are, and we know what our burn rate is, and then we'd be able to show what kind of actual dollars and cents. We can bottom line it now, and for investors, this is the meat and potatoes for them. How do they get their money back, and what is their return on their investment? And so we can't know that without doing the details to get to this kind of numbers. And so that's really the back end of the business planning is building it out and then showing the numbers at the end.
One last thing I'd like to mention, and I think should be utilized more often, is requiring anybody that's reviewing your business plan to sign a non-disclosure agreement, because these business plans, they're going to take a lot of your time and effort, and there is proprietary information in there, and there is information as far as your estimates, that is valuable, and so it's not something that you want distributed, and something that you want a lot of people to see. And so utilize even just a simple NDA in order to keep your business plan private and keep it from being distributed to other individuals. It is something to be valued.
Well, and so, as we talk about the business planning, keep in mind this is something that can be done simultaneously. We don't know, exactly, for instance, at least in terms of the timing of like when certain cities will opt in, but during this time frame, we can build out these packages now. A lot of the information we're talking about is not location specific. And so it's not building size specific sometimes. Sometimes it's just, I need to know from a processing perspective how much internal square footage I need for, the spark-free room, for instance, for that processing center. And so a lot of this data set can be built out even when there's other uncertainty in terms of the rest of it, like the location, for instance. And the further along you get now, the faster you'll be ready to go when those other items come into certainty. Right. And so we're telling our clients now, and we're asking anyone involved in the industry, multitask. Do a couple things at the same time, and that includes getting this project together in the business planning. And so as we talk maybe next week about some other items in the industry, certainly there's going to be a return to discussing raising capital. I see there were some questions on that today, and we're going to be getting back into it. But if you're interested in getting any capital and seeking an investor, get your business plan done. That's the first thing you got to do. And so we'll look forward to seeing you next week. For Craig Aronoff and Barton Morris, thank you very much. Have a great week.